and welcome to week 3. I'm so happy to see all of you. Mary Jane, you made it. Robin, you're here. I'm so happy. And Leanne and Pam, Gail, Sonia. I know Sonia's packing. That's why she has her picture up. So she is still here though. You took class yesterday. And you feel great. Oh, you took the Monday class. Oh, good. Good old sternal decompress. That's a good one. Yep, it'll be happening again on Saturday. So if you guys want to come and take class twice in a week, or not Saturday, I'm sorry, it's happening tomorrow. You're more than welcome to join again. Hello, Natalie. Hello, Barbara. And I saw already Julia, Michelle, and Bruce. All right. So any questions from last week? Anything that we covered that you weren't clear on that you wanted to go over today?
I just wanted to add that I use melt with yamana work.
I love it.
As well as you can also do the oming for vibrational healing of so if you want to do it. So my uncle is a speech pathologist, and his research was based on using chanting and ohms for healing of all of the respiratory area, throat, voice, and just that vibrational healing is very helpful.
I love that. And it's sort of, if you think about why we do the right? It's all that vibration that we're sending to the roof of our mouth, right? You know how, and we're going to touch on this today, the domes and the arches, right? And there is a correlation, I think, between the sound and the pelvic floor. I'm not sure, but I think, Robin, that's kind of in line with what you're talking about. So that would be kind of a fun thing. If there's any research you find that you want to put on the Facebook group that we could find, sounds like
or chanting,
or what?
Chanting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of Kundalini yoga, isn't it? Is all the chanting. It's a big part of that healing, is the vibrational sound. So, okay, beautiful. So thank you for that. Yeah, Julie.
So this came up this week. I've been talking about that journey box, and I've ordered one, and it hasn't come in yet, but somebody was asking me about it because they had been to an actual healing, sound healing place, and they did their finger on a bowl. So this was live. It wasn't in a box or anything. And of course, she said, turn that thing off, get it away from me. So whatever that frequency was, wasn't hitting with her just right. So she had an interesting question. You have to hear it. Is it something about going through the ears, or the vibration still out there? Is it still making an effect on your tissues? Does it have to go through your ears? How does the frequency, because I would imagine the frequency is out there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I'm going to have to ask my friend Tanya and have her speak on that. I would say vibration's vibration. And I think, you've had a bass, right? Like, and you can feel the floor move. You don't have to be, you don't have to hear to experience that vibration. Same thing with people who are hearing impaired, who are dancers. Sometimes the vibration of the music is what helps them to be able to dance. So I'm going to say no, that you have to hear. And I would also say it depends on, if you think about people who are sensory sensitive, like autism, right? Where it's too much. So so your friend, maybe they're a little on the spectrum, maybe.
Yeah, no, maybe.
And so that sensation is like, oh my God, get it out of here. I can't take it. It's too much. So I think there's a lot to be said about that as well. There's so much we don't understand, especially in the quantum field and all of this, and what affects us and why. And that's why, I know Sue's been talking a lot about certain megahertz that are good for this. And my friend Tanya, who's been studying sound for quite some time, she's like, you got to get that out. Like, forget about it. Like, as far as this megahertz is good for this and this megahertz is good for that. And it's not that way. It's not that way at all. It's a very, for some people, it's very customary. It's very individual. It's very personal. But any vibration is healing.
Mhm.
But then there are certain vibrations that could be harmful. Have you ever seen the work of the rice experiment, where you have, or Dr. Emoto's work, where he plays, he's got water molecules under a microscope, and he'll play certain music, and it will alter the actual water molecule. And if you play things that are like evil satanic music, whatever that is, I've never played it, but apparently the water molecule shrinks and it like it turns like a lemon, as opposed to playing like Bach or Beethoven, it turns into this beautiful snowflakey looking thing. So vibration is a very real thing, and snowflakes can't, or water molecules can't hear, right? So they're
Right,
the
right.
vibration. But it's a great thing to expand upon. And I'm going to ask her about that, because I'd love for her to contribute on that. So again, if you don't know who Tanya Clark is, she's a melt instructor as well. And her company is thedancingsoul.com. If you want to experience and explore, she has a setup of like 5 microphones, and she does it all virtually. You just pop in the headphones, and it's remarkable. And she's so good at doing a journey, like a meditation journey. She'll take you through. She's got one of these voices, and you're just like, wow. Yeah, it's great. Gail.
What did you say the name of her company is again?
Thedancingsoul.com. So
Thank
maybe
you.
Nancy will probably pop it in the chat. So, yep, she's on it. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the core, right? Because the core, yeah, it's pretty contested. So I'm going to take you through some slides. We're going to cover all of this stuff and all the different views. I'm going to, for some of you, introduce a concept or a theory to you that you may have never heard before. And then what I want to do is take a break. And when we come back, I would love for one of you to share a case study that maybe you're struggling with somebody who's got something that sounds problematic in the core, that we can start to build a map for them, but also see if we can troubleshoot for you. Yeah, does that sound good? Okay, great. So, so core, such a contested thing, right? So what is the core? Well, it's there's so many different fields of ideas out there, right? It's what are the myths? What are the exercises? What are the components, right? What story is your client caught up in, right? When you hear about the core. And I ask that because it could almost be to their detriment, right? So when the average bear, the average human thinks about, oh yeah, my core, I got to work on my core, they think about stuff like this, right? Like they think 6-pack abs, or like, if you think about all like in the fitness industry, they're like, it's the ab burn hour, get your 6-pack abs and crush it, core fusion, everything's just like burn it, bicycles, and all this stuff. And it's just kind of goofy. Now, do I want abs that look like the lady on the lower left? Damn straight I do. I think that's fabulous looking, but it's not important, right? This is the shape of your rectus abdominis. That's how it's shaped, right? That's how the fascial pockets create this muscle structure. Its job is to flex the spine. That's its job, right? But it's not functional except to like bend over, to get out of bed. Like, why do we exercise it, right? It just seems kind of a silly thing. Like you don't see, like, I don't know, people don't go running through fields and stop, drop, and sit up because that's going to help them in life. I mean, it's just kind of a goofy thing that we do. So many times I have had clients who come in with injuries and they're explaining their problems and they go, I know, I need to strengthen my core. And I'm like, well, no, I would say you need to stabilize your core. right? Not so much strengthen it. Maybe you want strong abs, right? But why are we trying to hypertrophy this system, right? Because so much of it is stabilizing. Most of it is stabilizing. So you can't hypertrophy, which means to make bigger, right? You can't make bigger stabilizers, and nor would you want to. That's not their job. They're meant to be at a low load contraction at all times. They're not meant to be phasic. They're not meant to be big prime movers, right? So, the fitness industry has kind of made a mess out of all this. So what do we believe in our world, right? Well, Sue has come up with probably one of the more important models, in my opinion, with the neurocore. And this is a huge concept, right? It's very big. And if I'm pretty sure it's on the Facebook group, but I can email it out as well, which is the neurocore paper that Sue wrote, because I asked her a question one day, and to answer it, she wrote like a 60-page paper. I love that. I should ask her more questions and have her write more papers. But the neurocore paper is pretty amazing. And it's on the back end of the website. It's on the instructor site. And she really does talk about it's so complex, right? Because the core is not just your abs, right? It's not even just the reflexive core, where you'll hear a lot of people talk about certain theories, different ones coming out, and a lot of them very science-based, on the gut sac, right? Or the pelvo-abdominal container, which I love that. I think the pelvic abdominal container really helps to talk about the reflexive core. The rooted core, not so much. The rooted core is a very complex, difficult to wrap your brain around kind of concept. So I wanted us to understand this, because this is what you're working on with your clients, right? And not in a vacuum. These two things, we talk about them separately. Sue has created a model. She has cut it up into two parts to define it, but it is inherently linked. And it is the diaphragm and the psoas that are the main connectors between the two, but it cannot be separated. They work together inherently at all times. So the rooted and reflexive core mechanisms are always working, right? They are always working and operating together as a system. The connective tissue, the muscles, the nervous system, these components of the reflexive and rooted core mechanisms are all operating in response to the body sense that we have going on, the information, the neurological information going through us at all times, right? And they're being transmitted between these two systems to keep us moving, ideally to keep us stable and keep us upright over a small basis of support, which is our feet. When it's working properly, the relationship between your masses and spaces is optimal, right? They all balance over each other, joint centralization works, and you're able to move effortlessly without compensation, pain, or injury. That's not usually the case with most of us. Something is awry. So what is it that's awry? Well, let's look at each component. Let's look at the reflexive core for a second. And again, you hear about these idea of double layers, right? Well, we established that there really are no layers. They're just different densifications. But when you cut it up, it looks like a big fascial bag. But of course, that fascial bag is continuous with other tissue throughout the entire body. But we're going to just, for the purposes of cutting it up to define it, it's a dual layer bag. And it creates a cylinder that surrounds the gut and the spine. Egg-shaped. I love that. And these are great things to communicate with your client, right? You have this egg-shaped container that protects your gut and your spine, and it can get a little weak and a little slow on the uptake because of certain activities or patterns, mostly from sitting a lot. So today I want to teach you something that's going to help you to get that, that protective mechanism to fire properly again, right? I mean, it's just, you make it super simple. You don't have to use these impressive words. This language is for you guys, right? That it's a creator who created this model, who communicates with you as professionals, and then we simplify it down for our clients, right? That's why we say things like stuck stress. We don't talk about, fascial dehydration and, the lack of fibroblast activity and microvacuole spaces. We just don't talk to our general public like that, right? But this is three-dimensional. and it supports the organs, connects the deep stabilizing muscles. And the point of it is with every breath, ideally it's supporting, protecting, and stabilizing your spine. It is a reflex, right? If I were to come up to Nancy and like go like I'm going to punch her in the stomach, she would immediately go into a fetal position because it's a reflex. It's an inherited reflex that we have. Because if you think back, once upon a time, if you believe these things, we were on all fours. We were quadruped animals. Our most vital organs were facing the floor. They were protected, right? And then we had the audacity to sit upright and stand upright and leave our entire vulnerability out for the world to murder. So you have these reflexes in there to constantly protect what is known as your vital organs. They're called vital for a reason. So we need to keep this reflex as optimal as possible so that we're always protected and stabilized. So it's not just about spinal stability and, you know, holding your guts in. It's literally to save your life, to keep your vital organs safe. It's then you've got, and again, this is not something that can be strengthened with abdominal exercises. You can pike and plank and sit up until you're blue in the face. It's not going to make this system better. What makes this system more efficient is your breath, right? It's tapping into the diaphragm. That's the whole point of why we do the 3D breath breakdown and the focused breath, right? That relationship with the diaphragm. Now the rooted core, a lot more complicated, right? It's this full body system from head to toe, and it's three-dimensional again. It's like it's a tube, it's a channel, right? And it is, again, it's inherently linked with your reflexive core. It doesn't bypass it, it's connected to it. And it starts at the bottom. Well, it doesn't start anywhere. It actually has no origin and no insertion, right? It's just a three-dimensional system. But we like to say, okay, well, it starts at the bottom of the foot, and then it like a channel moves up the deepest portion of the legs, the inner thighs, right? So when we do inner thigh glide and shear, when we do inner thigh lift, knee knockers, plie squat, all of that, when we do the foot treatment and we are getting right on position point number one, we are tapping directly into this tissue. We are tapping directly into this cylinder. This mechanism is what grounds you to the earth. You're working directly with ground reaction force, which is really just the earth meeting you, right? So if you know Isaac Newton, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? Well, that's the deal, right? We're ground reaction force is the force of the earth coming back into our body, because gravity actually comes up to meet us. Not so much us going down to it, it comes up to meet us. It's kind of a trippy concept, which I haven't quite wrapped my brain around yet, but that's what John Sharkey says. And I'm like, my brain, it hurts. So this rooted core mechanism grounds us, and it works with gravity to also lift you up, because again, gravity meets us up. And that's what keeps our masses balanced over our spaces, right? If one of these is out of balance, so are your masses and spaces, right? If you sit for long periods of time and you develop a upper cross, lower cross syndrome, forward head carriage, both of these are going to get out of whack, right? So still, the rooted core is about stabilizing the spine as well, right? And just making us whole from top to bottom. The other thing, if you want to talk about reflexes, this is where your writing reflexes are embedded, right? Remember, there's more sensory nerve endings by the billions in your fascia. Fascia is your largest sensory organ. It's everything that you are. Everything's made from the same stuff, right? But this particular system, if you will, how is it that we don't fall over every time we take a step? And it's because of this relationship with the earth via the writing reflexes. So if you remember the story about Sue's mom and the oranges, and she talks about how she just stepped off the hard surface onto a soft surface and fell down, and all the oranges ended up all over the lawn, it's because her writing reflexes were off, right? Her rooted and reflexive core were out of balance. The vibration was not able to right itself properly to go up the channel. And within that channel, domes and arches, right? So ideally, if we were all perfect, every time we took a step, the vibration would go all through those domes and arches, the arches of the feet, the ankle mortise, you've got the knees, you have the hips, you have the pelvic floor, you have the base, or you have the diaphragm, you got the lungs, you've got the throat, the orbs of the eyes, and the crown of the head. Yeah, I might be missing one, but that's what I got right now. So ideally, we take a step and those vibrations seamlessly go all the way through those channels, right? In a perfect world. But a lot of times they don't, and they shoot out in different areas. And so we wonder why we end up with like knee issues, hip issues, right? That's part of it. That's part of the story. So again, cannot be strengthened with exercise. Stabilizing the core, it's about neurological stability. All right. It's not about doing these exercises to get it stronger. Again, you can hold a plank, and these freaking plank challenges piss me off because most of the time people don't have good shoulder girdle stability anyway, but it's not going to strengthen the system. You cannot strengthen it. You cannot hypertrophy it. It's neurological in nature. It is fascial in its structure, and we have to take care of our tissue. So the sort of the meeting of the minds of both these systems is your psoas and your diaphragm. The psoas does not look like this usually in a cadaver. I have yet to see one look this pretty and simple. There are some that are beautiful and juicy, and we love that. But remember, this is an artist rendering. This is not necessarily reality. The diaphragm, it's harder to suss out. I mean, you got some lungs to get around in order to find the diaphragm, but once you get in there in a cadaver, you also have to get around the ribs. And in order to really get your hands around a diaphragm, you've got to saw off the ribs, and you got to be careful not to cut yourself, because ribs, once they're cut, are really sharp. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful muscle. It's inherently linked with all this tissue is combined, and they work together in harmony to support, protect, and stabilize us. The debate will go on until the end of time about psoas. Is it a hip flexor? Is it a spinal stabilizer? What's its job? Is there such a thing as an iliopsoas complex? I'm not here to talk anatomy. I'm just giving you a brief overview, but it's something that I love how Joanne Avison says, stop thinking of it as a muscle. It's a superpower. I just think that's great. Liz Cook, for those of you who've taken her work or done any of her courses, she says it's like a tuning fork. And I love that, because to me, that contributes to that channel of tissue. So as is part of the rooted core. So when we do moves like core challenge, when we do single leg lift, double leg lift, single leg tap down, all of that is to try to get optimal tone back into the superpower, to get the superpower to be super again, because it gets exhausted. It does atrophy. So the opposite, we can't hypertrophy this, but it can atrophy. I mean, you can plump it back up to where it's supposed to be, but I would say atrophy or hypertrophy, if you will, of psoas, you could find maybe more in a cow, right? Where you can get your beef fillet, that's what that is. Or you get a pork fillet, filet mignon, that's what it is in an animal, is their psoas muscle. That's what you're looking at. So when you get those suckers and you take them out of the plastic, you're like, I'm going to make this. I can't help it. I look at it, I'm like, my God, I'm about to have psoas for dinner. And I try not to gross myself out. Instead, I make a delicious pork tenderloin, right? So anyway, the hip, in this, you can see, because of the way the psoas connects the torso to the leg, pretty much the hip is continuous with the diaphragm as well via psoas. Kind of cool, right? So it's all fascially connected. So again, we're talking continuity here. This is all about continuity. So one of the things that Sue talks about a lot when you first learn about the reflexive core is this idea of a hydraulic amplification mechanism. And it can be something that's like a really big word. And I just want you to understand that the hydraulic amplification mechanism is what fascia does. That's its job. It is constantly, and it's a broadening of the tissue. If you remember that slide the first day, that muscles, tension, fascia, that's what's going on, right? With every breath we take, with every move we make, I sound like a Sting song. I'll be watching you. No, I will be supporting, protecting, and stabilizing you. That is fascia's job with the hydraulic amplification mechanism. But what a great way to explain it than talking about the breath and the diaphragm and the core and how this all works. And I love this image. You'll see I put a note down in the bottom right of where I found it, my source. There's just an article talking about the core, and it's very interesting. And I probably could disagree with some of that article, but it's a good one to look at anyway. Just talking about whether, what is it that's the hip flexor is psoas the hip flexor, right? But I love this because it really does. If you think about that, right, you see how transversus abdominis actually contracts to draw the abdomen in. So it's the tissues shrink, right? They contract and it tensions the tissue, right? The abdominal tissue on the front. So when you hear me cue 3D breath, and I say, as you exhale, notice how the ribs start to naturally deflate and you feel almost like a shrinky dink effect in between your hip bones. And that's like a trampoline kind of thing. That's because transversus abdominis is contracting and tensioning that fascia. That's part of it, right? You've got psoas as part of this relationship, multifidus also contracting to help tension thoracolumbar fascia, and the pelvic floor comes up ideally, right? So we don't have to force it with like trying to Kegel. I know that there's some instructors who tell their people to contact their pelvic floor, and I'm like, I wouldn't do that necessarily because not everybody has laxity in the tissue. Some people have hypertonicity for various reasons, most especially if there's sexual abuse, a history of sexual abuse. Diaphragm, the arrows are kind of going the wrong direction, but he's given the idea because when every time you breathe in, the diaphragm goes down and the belly expands, you exhale, diaphragm relaxes and everything comes in, right? But this is the idea. If this helps you to picture what's going on when we do our 3D breath breakdown to understand the reflexive core a little bit better. Now, rooted core, a little bit trickier, right? But you can look at anatomy trains and look at the deep front line because that was the model that Sue originally went by to get this idea, was studying Tom's work. And you can see there's the anatomy to show the muscles invested within the fascia in this tube, in this channel. So I just think it's a great way to kind of go back to it and see just how inherent and deep into the body it is, right? So again, think about all that stuff we do when we do all the rooted core work. Think about when we do the foot treatment, how is it that people are able to sense an arm getting longer than another? Well, it goes directly up your spine, right? You get that fluid exchange going all the way up your spine. You can have a neck ache, right? Maybe you have a crummy neck, but you do the lower body compression and your neck pain goes away. Well, here you go. You see a nice little example of how that can happen, right? Continuity is what it's all about. Now, we'd be remiss to talk about all this without the one structure in here in the human form that is what keeps us upright, and that is our spine. Yeah, the beautiful sacred spine. There actually is a class that Joanne taught called the Sacred Spine. It was like a 3-week series, I think. I want to say 3 or 4 weeks, and it was really quite beautiful. The spine in classical anatomy, they call it a column, right? Or a vertebral column, a spinal column. Not a good word. Columns are structures that hold up buildings, right? I can see where they came up with it because during a cadaver dissection, probably they had the guy face down and opened him up. And if you look at the image on the left, but it's the third one, it's the posterior view of the spine. It looks like a column, right? Not so much laterally. That ain't no column. There's no building would be held up by those curves, right? So we call it a column, and fair enough for the posterior view, but not so much in reality. The image on the right shows a tensegrity structure, right? Of the tension. It's a model of the spine. It's more accurate to show that there's no column at all. And really, it's not rigid at all. It's a very fluid, beautiful structure. The curves are the most important thing about the spine, and this is developmental, we think about when a baby is learning to turn over, when it flips on its belly and it lifts its head looking for mommy, when it starts to rock on its belly, it's developing all these beautiful curves. It's primary and secondary curves, right? So the primary curve is the fetal curve, right? When we were in utero and we developed that, roundedness, our fetal curve. And then the secondary curves are the cervical curve and the lumbar curve. And you could even say the sacral curve as well, also gets developed through development. And these are crucial for effortless movement. So probably some of you who have fusions, or of people who have fusions, you can sense how these curves, without them, they actually start to limit other things, right? So suddenly other movement is being restricted. It's not as fluid. You have to be careful about certain things that you used to do, you can't do anymore because you've lost these curves. So is it just about the spine? Is that what it is? Why are these curves so important? What is it about the spine? Well, I'm going to introduce you, if you haven't heard of it, to the spinal engine theory. And this theory was created or developed by a gentleman by the name of Serge Grakovetsky in the 80s. And he alludes that the spine is the engine that drives what he calls reciprocal motion and human locomotion. So the thought behind it is that, everyone thinks like, oh, well, your legs move you and your torso is along for the ride, which would make the spine a passive passenger, which if you think about that for a hot second, you're like, I don't think so. That doesn't seem to make sense to me. Partly because if you think about how we move, we don't move in single planes, right? We're always moving in what we call an oblique plane. Some people could argue the biomechanical model of talking about planes, frontal, sagittal, transverse, that we constantly, when we're walking, we're moving in a sagittal plane, meaning just front to back. And it's like, but you've taken away spinal rotation, which is a natural thing that happens when we move. Spinal rotation is also happening because of pelvic rotation, right? It's all working together. So the spinal engine theory, the limbs are actually just extensions of spinal motion. They actually amplify spinal motion, right? So that's quite a theory, right? And it ends up that the spine truly is the engine that drives the pelvis, and it's the pelvis and the legs that swing out from that to amplify all of that motion. So Grakovetsky, who was an astrophysicist, who ended up with massive back pain, and he went to various doctors and they all gave him different answers. And as an astrophysicist, he thought this was ludicrous, right? Because he believes in absolutes. So he studied it himself. And that's how he came up with this engine, and mostly through studying amputees. And it was noticing that people without femurs could walk just the same as non-amputees. So he did a video from the waist up, and he showed that it showed that there was no difference in the spinal activity in somebody with or without legs. So just showing that the motion was exactly the same, and huzzah, you can walk without legs. It's just the legs amplify movement. It makes life much more convenient and expedient, right? We like, especially if we want to run and we want to jump and we want to dance and we need legs, right? But you could move without legs. The spinal engine, this is where the curves come in. The lordosis and the lateral bend is what creates axial rotation. So big words, right? Okay, so if we think about if you believe in evolution and we evolved from fish, right? So fish, how do they swim? Think of it in your brain. You think of a fish, they swim from side to side, right? But then some of those fish were like, hey, that looks pretty cool up there. I think I want to go on that land. And the fish started to crawl up onto land. And all was well and good until they realized that there were rocks and things that they had to go over. So in order to do that, now you have to lift yourself up. Now you're getting into extension, right? So when you get into extension, flexion with lateral bending, that creates rotation. And that's known as coupled motion. It's a law, the law of coupled motion. You have two of those together, you end up with a third, or as Karen Kirkness likes to call it, it's thrupled motion. So within all this is also how we started to evolve our curves, right? So kind of a cool thing. So the way Grakovetsky says it is that the spinal engine with lordosis and lateral bend creates axial rotation, and the legs are nothing more than the energy transfer between the pelvis and the ground. I mean, come on, man, right? Why are we so focused on our legs, like getting all beautiful and toned, right? It's got a functional purpose, right? And in the equal and opposite fashion, rotation at the lower segments produces reciprocal motion at higher levels. So what does that mean? That means that if rotation is happening below, it's also happening above. Again, if you have a spinal fusion, you're gonna have some compensation, don't you think? Because you're losing some rotation. So what do we do to help with that? Well, we got to make sure that we maintain some level of rotation in the spine. It's vital. It's vital for our health. Grakovetsky also knows that the importance of the thoracolumbar fascia in creating this tension and energy transfer. We're going to get into that a little bit more. So the muscles of the back alone can't be responsible for all these huge forces, right? Like squatting. And I mean, we squat, especially as ladies, we squat all day long to pee-pee on the toilet, right? So the muscles can't be the only thing doing it. Your spine and the thoracolumbar fascia have a big role to play with that. The fascial system is responsible for the conservation of energy and movement. And I think I briefly talked about that last week, that muscle energy is expensive, but fascial energy is free. Yeah. Or actually I put it on the Facebook group, I think is what I did. So when you have reciprocal motion, the upper body becomes important for this movement as well. So that makes sense. The swing of the arms, you don't walk without moving your arms, right? I mean, nobody does. I dare you to tie your arms to your side and go for a walk. It's going to be very uncomfortable. You need the arm motion to help facilitate the spinal rotation and to aid in proper movement. And then there's this guy named Charlie Francis who talked about the importance of arms and rotation through sprinting. So if you're a runner, you freaking need that, right? And if you've ever been a runner and you've ever had a coach talk about how you pump the arms, because that's all part of the coupled rotation, right? The spine is not a steel rod for weight bearing. If you watch athletes move, you will see reciprocal motion in everything they do, right? So to call the spine a column is just silly. It's extremely fluid and it is vital to how we move. So pathologies in the spine are going to tell you a story. So speaking of pathologies, here's an image from, this is from Eric Dalton. This is not his image. This is from Grakovetsky's work. But this gentleman obviously has no arms, no legs, but he can still move, and his spinal activity is exactly the same as somebody without with arms and legs. If you want to look at somebody, you could go onto YouTube and look up a guy named Nick Volchik, and it's spelled V as in Victor, U as in umbrella, J as in jam, I as in India, C as in cat, I as in India, C as in cat. He's also a motivational speaker, maybe so. I think he's from Australia. He's lovely. And I will share the paper from Eric Dalton called Are Legs Really Necessary? And you can also find it in his book, but I also have the paper, which I'll show you. So the law of coupled motion, again, this is an evolutionary thing, right? But it just shows how the cervical decouple the shoulder motion. You have the counter rotation of the shoulder with thoracic motion, and the rotation of the pelvis, which is not, it's forward and back, right? With a little bit of rotation. So when Sue talks about the importance of the SI joint and how people are so quick to say, I have SI joint dysfunction. It's like, okay, well, it's more complicated than that. But you can see where SI joint dysfunction, which is just a stiffening of that joint and that joint not able to move, it's going to screw up the whole chain. Yeah, you need this. You need to have these joints free to move. So SI joint shear, super important. When you do the foot treatment, and if someone doesn't get a change in arm length, right, or they get it on one side and then they do the other side and the other side doesn't catch up to the other one, you got to wonder what's going on in the pelvis, right? There's something stagnant, something stuck in the sacrum. And how can we free that so that we can have more freedom of movement, no pain, right? So we walk from the spine down, right? The swing of the arms helps to amplify the movement. And the fiber, it's the engine uses fibers. It uses the fascia for the energy store and expenditure. So again, looking at fish, you can see fish aren't rigid, right? They don't have a rigid spine. It's segmented, but it's flexible and it moves from side to side. The spine is the energy transfer system, and the movement is amplified by the fins, especially in the tail. I took this slide and the information from a talk from Neil Galloway, who did a thing on the Fascia Hub. If you're a member of the Fascia Hub or not, I highly recommend you write that down too. The Fascia Hub is it's like $10 a month or something, and so many great lectures and videos and articles on there. And this was from the fascial spine, and Neil Galloway, his contribution. He uses the analogy of, fascia in the spine, like he uses the ship analogy. And I know Tom Myers has done the same thing, where if you could imagine the mast is the spine, and that's not really an accurate description either, because that's a description of a tensegrity system, but it's not a biotensegrity system, because the mast relies on the ship in order to be there. But we don't rely on anything, right? We're in the round. Our spine does not rely on the earth to function, right? Still, I love the work he has here and some of these metaphors of this idea of a bow and an arrow, right? Or the idea of the spinal or the muscular windup with a fascial free recoil, right? Using spinal torque to initiate an active muscular windup with a passive fascial release, like a baseball pitcher or a golfer, right? A golf swing is what I was trying to say. And the locomotion is centered in the spine. The energy transfer system is stored in our tissues. And in this particular case, our thoracolumbar fascia. We're going to break the thoracolumbar fascia down a little bit more. Your lordosis is so important in the spinal engine, and it's like a bow and an arrow. It's a flexible energy store. So the trunk and the spine, again, here's a core thought, right? The trunk and the spine represent our human core, right? This is Neil Galloway's thoughts. Dense in form, complex in function. It's able to move and accommodate in a wide range of postures and positions, ways of moving that rely on many small joints at multiple levels. There's a lot going on in the spine, right? And they all have various densities and shapes to accommodate this mobility that we need as humans. And together they permit a universal range of spiraling movements that accommodate shoulder and pelvic girdles and optimize deployment of the limbs. Again, it helps with the limbs, but then the limbs also help the spine, right? It's all part of it, right? So again, back to Grokovetsky, he describes how muscle action alone is costly in effort and energy, and it's the fascia that's more efficient. It's able to store and return the oscillation of muscular loading with a fascial spring back and return. Muscle action is optimized by stance, posture, and positioning of adjacent joints to adjust muscle and fascial length, tone, and efficiency. So it's all working together. There's no hierarchy here, right? I mean, there is, but there isn't. And we can talk more about that later. But in particular, regulation of the lumbar lordosis has a key role in maintaining resting states of stance and posture and the multiple transitions of lifting and load bearing. Biotensegrity concepts will be considered to help explain the distribution, orientation, and weave of the collagen bindings that constitute the fascial spine. So really it's about the fascial system, the thoracolumbar fascia in concert with this lumbar curve that is so important in understanding this. So this idea of archery is really kind of interesting too. If you think about the spine like a recurved bow, okay? So a recurved bow, if you look at this image, it curves down, but then it curves back, right? So it's not just a stick that's straight, like the column that was previously discussed. It's got these curves. And the reason why is that in doing this, the recurve bow is it stores more energy and it delivers more energy efficiently than the straight limbed bow. So it gives a greater amount of energy and speed for the arrow. So if the bow is the spine and the arrow is us, right, and our movement, it's kind of a great little metaphor. And then that brings you to this idea that dry firing your bow is bad. It is very, very bad. So I don't know if any of you have ever done archery. I did it for like a hot second when I was in college, and it was fabulous. But it's also scary because you are warned over and over again, don't dry fire your bow. And what does that mean? Well, to launch an arrow, the archers use muscles to draw the bowstring, which rolls the cables through the cams to bend the bow's limbs. The force is then stored in the limbs of the bow, right? And it depends on the draw weight, like what strength do you have to draw it, right? The stronger you are, the more you can pull that bow. When the archer releases the bowstring, the limbs spring back into place, converting the limb stored power into kinetic energy to propel the arrow into flight. And when everything works smoothly, you hear a little twing, right? As the bowstring releases, and you feel a slight vibration of the bow in your hand, and you watch the arrow fly, and hopefully you hit a bullseye, right? So what happens if it doesn't work so smoothly? What happens if there's no arrow to absorb the energy? If it can't go anywhere, it's going to go back into the bow, which is not designed to absorb that power. So what's going to happen to the bow? It might snap into your face and smash your face, or it might break. You're going to damage the bow. Screws are going to go loose. Parts are going to go flying. It's bad, right? So if you use the same analogy in the human form, it begs the question, how many times do we dry fire our bodies, right? How many times do we dry fire ourselves? And we can talk about these things of various examples, like a swing and a miss, right? It seems kind of funny when somebody is playing baseball and they swing and they miss, right? It seems like a micro fire, right? A dry fire of sorts, but it's like, whatever. You've been doing that since we were 5. But these have consequences. Everything has consequences. These are little micro dry fires that happen over time, that eventually you're in your 30s and you start having low back pain. You start having herniations. You're like, I don't understand this. I wasn't an athlete. I didn't do anything crazy. You know, you think everything's fine. You're careful with yourself. But if you look over the history of everything, or you step off that curb funny, or you think that there's a step and there isn't, you get that that goes all the way up your body. Thank God we've got the fascia to absorb the shocks and the vibrations. But again, over time, these things have an effect. So closed system of fibers loaded with muscular effort, without a weighted arrow, there's no opportunity to transfer that energy. So the same is true in the human body. So you think of, again, swinging, missing a golf swing, a tennis ball, stepping off a curb when you don't expect it, or expecting to pick up something heavy and it's not. You go flying backwards. They're micro insults, but over time they can cause degeneration, right? So these are little concepts to think about. So your thoracolumbar fascia, we did talk about this. This is a big part of the spinal engine theory. And when we look at it in cadaver dissection or in anatomy books, they're like, oh yeah, there it is, thoracolumbar fascia. But it's not just this layer. It's actually more than one layer, and it is continuous. I mean, this has been dissected. There are layers and layers on top of this as well. So what I love to do with a lot of my clients is to really wow them. And I will have, a lot of you have taken my classes. I have you lie in a rest assess, right? Then I have you do the hand treatment. I'll do even a mini softball hand treatment, but I'll add in the arm rinse. And then I have you lie back down. And a lot of people say, oh my God, my thighs went down. How is that possible? Well, continuity. The arm lines feed into the fascia of latissimus dorsi, which feeds into thoracolumbar fascia, which feeds into the glutes, which feeds into the hamstrings, right? It's the simplest way to say it, but everything's in the round, right? So the hand treatment can hydrate the tissues all the way to the thoracolumbar fascia. I mean, that's mind-blowing when you think about it, right? So there are numerous like ideas and thought. There's some different anatomists are coming up with. There's more than one layer of thoracolumbar fascia, but how many are there? Is it one? Is it two? Well, it's actually debatable. I like to think there are three. And I'm going to show you this in a second. But another thought to keep in mind is that your thoracolumbar fascia is not just continuous with the lumbar spine and whatnot. It's also continuous with your abdominal fascia, right? With the psoas and the paraspinals and the reticular sheath. It's all connected, right? So if we look at some pictures, this is from Carla Stecco's book, The Functional Atlas of the Human Fascial System. I highly recommend that book. I actually brought it to Red Mountain. So Robin, I think you might have seen it when I had it on the table. And it's a beautiful resource if you are okay looking at cadaver dissections. Yeah, warning, cadaver dissections. It's going from A to F, right? And it's the layers are coming off more and more and more, and you can see the continuity and how that tissue really just goes clear into the armpit, right? All the way through the body. I love this image that this was a workshop I was doing with Karen Kirkness. That's why she's in the lower corner. I couldn't find this picture anywhere else. So I just screenshotted it and put it up here because I love this cross section illustration showing the various layers. So you can see how you have, according to this analysis, 3 layers, a posterior layer, a middle layer, and anterior layer. So what we see in that first image is the posterior layer of thoracolumbar fascia. Middle layer, some debate that that's the more powerful of them all because of how it blends into the anterior fibers, into psoas, and into the abdominal aponeuroses as well. But really, I would say the anterior layer does more of that. But it's all continuous. So again, when we do the 3D breath breakdown and the focused breath, this is what we're talking about. You're getting the musculature here to tension the tissue and look at what, when it's tensioned, what it is supporting. You can see it right here, the spine, the abdomen, the guts, right? It's all connected. It's supporting psoas, right? So when we do core challenge and we're breathing and we're protecting the spine, but we're also working with psoas there to keep it stable, to get it to do what it's born to do, right? I just think it's such a beautiful image of that. And so I sit here and I'm like, tell me again how we are machines, right? How are we biomechanical? Look at that. Look at that beautiful movement that we can do, how fluid that spine is, right? There's nothing columny or mechanical about us, yeah? So I just love that. So I'm going to pause. Once again, Amanda vomited a lot of information on you. I know. Spinal engine theory, right? It's just fabulous. He apparently did this presentation at a fascial congress and got a standing ovation because finally people are like, oh, this finally makes sense, right? Just makes sense. Natalie.
What the name of the functional something, you had the 6 pictures.
Yeah.
What is the name of that book and the author,
It's
please?
Carla Stecco's book, The Functional Atlas of Fascial Anatomy.
I just put it on the chat for everybody.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
Everybody go into the chat and look at all the fabulous links that Nancy so diligently posts so that I don't have to later. I'm going to save the chat just like I did. I emailed it to you guys. Did you all get the chat from last week? Was that helpful? Okay, good. They're not hyperlinked, but you still have the information there. So the Fascia Hub, she put that there. Yeah, Nick Vujic, he's fabulous. And I mean, he makes middle schoolers just cry. And they get in a line to hug him because he's so beautiful. He's such a beautiful soul. To be born without arms and legs and still change the lives of others. And he's married with a couple of kids. It's kind of cool. Let's see, what else did you put in here? The creator of the spinal engine theory is Grakovetsky. So it is, I have it right here. Is Graco, V as in Victor, E as in Edward, T as in Tom, SKY. And again, if you go on the Facebook group, I have you go on files, I've got a whole paper on spinal engine theory that he wrote. So you can find it there as well.
Thank you.
It's also in the chat.
It's also in the chat. Thank you, Nancy. Oh yeah, it's right there, right below it. Fascia Hub, repeat the name, Carlos Deco. Okay, anything else in here? Dr. Emoto, thank you for putting that. Tanya Clark. Yeah, Michelle, you said your client has a spinal fusion in several places. Yeah.
Yeah, I just spoke to her today. She still has to fill out the form, but her initial complaint is the carpal tunnel syndrome. But then once I got to talking, she's like, oh, and I had back surgery and I've got this and this. And I'm like, so I'm like, I have a form to
Yeah.
fill out. And so like I mean, gosh, like how, like, are there any specific do's and don'ts? Obviously, it depends on the person, but I mean,
Well, that's why we're doing this, right? To
Yeah,
figure this out. So
you-
I think one thing you guys have to remember is that melt is really not contraindicated for anybody, right? And I think it's when you have somebody with fusions, there's just certain things they can't do, right? Like her tuck and tilt is going to be limited. Doesn't mean she will get no mobility in her spine. No, a lot of it's coming very subtly in the pelvis. She'll still have pelvic-femoral rhythm. It's just going to be a little bit different. So how can you help her to get it a little more fluid, right? So it's about fluidity. But there are certain things that, you know, just when you look at her tucking and tilting, you're going to see very little movement, but she's still doing it, right?
So it's
mhm.
okay to put her, well, I mean, I usually start people on the flat side and then work up, but
I think that's a great idea. I mean, if that's, I mean, I don't always do that, but that's something, again, your rest assess is going to give you a lot of information. Some of this, a lot of times, is going to be trial and error. And you're going to start to do something you're going to think it's going to be great for, and they're going to, I don't know, they're probably going to get us cramp. They're going to spaz out. They're going to be like, this is uncomfortable. So then you go, okay, never mind, let's get off. And usually it's the body saying, I'm not ready for this.
Okay.
So if someone's not ready to get on the roller, what do we do instead? Hands and feet. Absolutely. And we do it, and then we try again. And we keep going back and forth to see what the do's and don'ts are for that body, right? Carpal tunnel, 9 times out of 10, it's not carpal tunnel at all. It's actually, it's the neck, it's thoracic outlet. If this person, again, I don't know what they look like, but if you're lying them down on the ground and they're bent over in half like this, and they've got major kyphosis going on, yeah, you're probably going to end up with carpal tunnel like syndromes, because you are completely clamping down on the nerves and blood vessels that feed the arm in the brachial plexus. And so doctors go, oh, you've got carpal tunnel syndrome. We got to cut open the wrists and cut the tunnel open, which is only going to cause more problems, because cutting into tissue creates what?
scars,
Scar tissue.
yeah.
Scar tissue adhesions cause what to the fascia? What won't it do anymore?
It can't run through.
What's the word I use? It's not sliding, it's
Slide.
gliding. It will not glide. Yeah, you're going to lose glidability in the tissue. So restoring that is important. Helping get joint centralization back by getting the shoulder girdle back where it belongs. This won't happen in a week.
Yeah, she's a dentist.
Oh my God, of course she has carpal tunnel.
Yes.
Jeez, God, that's all you had to say. Say no more. No wonder she's had spinal surgeries. And I bet you she probably never needed those spinal surgeries, because there are a lot of fusion happy surgeons who are like, oh, I want to buy that chateau in you know, the Swiss Alps. Let me do a couple spinal surgeries on this person. I'm not saying they're all that way, but I'm always suspicious. So it breaks my heart. A lot of the people that I see are on my table whose lives are completely altered because they were told they needed something that they actually never really needed. They just needed the right therapist, which is why you guys are here.
Yay. Well, I'll let you know how it goes. Thanks
All
for
right,
that.
Robin.
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead, Robin.
So let's see, I don't know if you can see this, but behind me is my pull-up bar.
yes, I see it.
And so to all of my dentists and my people who do that kind of stuff, I tell them to stretch every day between patients throughout their day, so that they get that fascial stretch of the opposite of what they do.
Mhm.
And it's super, super helpful, even if they can't melt at that moment, or they can melt at the end of the day, but just so that they have a counter stretch to that constant forwardness. And then also about carpal tunnel, when I had some carpal tunnel issues, I also had TMJ issues.
Of course you do.
And it was super interesting because the PT who looked at my wrist just said, "Oh, I don't need to do the testing. Your wrist is so small. Of course you've got inflammation there." And so it was interesting because I ended up not getting any real treatment other than starting to do some melt and hand massages and things like that. And that was very helpful. And then Michelle, I have a 96-year-old with spinal fusions, and he gets on the roller just fine. So I get him on the roller. I just make sure he doesn't roll off the Cadillac. And because sometimes he can't coordinate his legs fast enough, but sometimes the riding reaction of being on the roller when you get those gentle rockings is really nice for his system because his system slowed down. And so getting that tiny bit of rocking and then riding himself sometimes, you know, even if it's a jerk in the body, it's still giving him that tiny little bit of thing that he wouldn't get in his normal day to have to try and correct. So anyways, but he's 96 and he's great on the roller. So
There you go.
don't be scared to put them on the roller.
Well, Sue, let's talk about the stretching because I watched something on MOD. She said the worst thing you can do for the carpal is to stretch like this. She didn't talk about
It's going to irritate the tissue even more.
Okay.
Stretching in general, that's going to be next week's discussion. I'm going to take stretching and throw a lot of mud at it.
Okay.
So
I'm ready.
Stretching is like a 4-lettered word to me a little bit. So yeah, when you talk about stretching, it's a very strong word. And I love the idea of hanging though, Robin. I love that idea of hanging. Teach your people how to find length. You can show someone, your dental hygienist and whatnot, how to lengthen tissue. They could do upper body length just by standing or sitting. You just lengthen your tissues and tilt your head and you feel it clear on down the arm. You play with the hands. This is all stuff you guys can practice on your own to see how it feels in your body. Moving the arms around, have them play with reaching below a chair and turning their head, seeing how that affects it. Being mindful of shoulder issues, right? Like none of this like weird behind the back, like watch their ribs. You've got to keep all those concepts of stability in mind, no matter what. It is not just for melt, it's for everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, Bruce, you had something to share?
Yeah, if I can remember now. That was a long time ago. Come on. With regards to the carpal tunnel and melt, any of the forearm techniques, rinsing techniques would be fabulous for that. I would think staying away from down here distally close to the wrist and freeing all this up, because quite often that carpal tunnel entrapment is somewhere through the forearm, and that's what creates what we feel in our hands. And another thing, you were talking about this extension. If you were to put a ball, even a little firmer ball than what our melt balls are there, and then do that extension and do the extension with another ball and broaden along the arch that way, that maintains that tunnel, that arch that our carpals form. And you can have finger movements as well, and that will get those tendons gliding and sliding through that small area that is called the carpal tunnel, that median nerve and all the finger flexors go through. So I hope that's helpful.
No, that's great. And again, you will find people who have genuine carpal tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
So many times they don't actually have that at all. They just have really bad shoulder girdle stability, right? Gail.
So if you've got someone with some carpal tunnel symptoms, or they have like a lot going on in their hand and wrist, as long as you don't put too much compression there, can you do like light rinsing? And then would it pay to do like some forearm shearing, but far away from not near the tight area?
Absolutely.
Yes, but you can rinse.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, even if you just start them with friction, just anything to just get things stimulated is they're halfway there. So yeah, get them using the hand treatment. But again, you got to remember continuity. You might have a pelvic problem that's really throwing everything out of whack. Remember your spinal engine. It's not just in one area. So you're sitting here talking about the wrist, and I appreciate all these contributions, but this is why their client intake is so important. This is why the notes you take are so important. This is why when you try something and something weird happens and they're like, oh no, this happened, say, no, it's just information. Let's write that down. Let's try something else and see what happens. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to figure out where the culprit is hiding. It's not always so obvious. So you may have genuine carpal tunnel, but how did you get there? How did you get there? You gotta unwind the story, right?
Yeah, she also rides horses.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
I'm like, please.
Yeah, she needs to meld on the regular so that she can do those things without a problem. She needs neurostrength big time, but she needs to hydrate first. Okay, so here's what I want to do. Who wants to talk about, I mean, we could continue to talk about Michelle's gal unless there's somebody else in this group who really needs help with their case study. No one's raising their hand. Gail? You just muted yourself somehow. I don't know what happened. You're muted. Unmute. I see the little red thing. There.
Okay.
Take two.
I'm going to need help with my case study, but I need to spend some more time like absorbing her information. She has pelvic floor issues, but she's been gone for a couple weeks. So, and so this week her husband was sounded like having a heart attack, but he's okay. So next week I'm gonna probably have lot of questions for her, but just listening to the information about where, like the whole thing about things maybe aren't coming from the area where the problem is giving me some thought for her. So we'll see.
Yeah, and remember with pelvic floor, what's a big thing to look at when we're melting?
Breathing. What else?
But rooted core. Rooted core, rooted core, rooted core.
Yeah.
Again, can't be separated from the reflexive core, but that work you do, inner thigh and inner thigh lift, inner thigh glide and shear, all of that stuff, the foot treatment, super important for her to do on the regular, right?
Okay.
And yeah, 3D breath breakdown. So rebalance is very important for her to do on a regular basis.
Yes.
Foot treatment, absolutely. And she might need a pelvic health physio.
She's got one, but sometimes she's got stuff going on with that too. So
okay, well, she can work in combination, by doing her own work. So yeah, pelvic floor issues are tricky, especially if you don't have a good physio. Julie had a question, then we'll talk to Robin, then we're going to take a break. Okay.
So my question isn't necessarily about my case study, but just a client that I have that I don't understand. She's been melting for quite a while now, and she's one of those people that is super exact. Like she's a very, very good student. She's very mindful of what she's learning and trying to get the nuances. And even though she's still doing like level 1 moves, pretty much, that's what she's stuck to. I don't understand how somebody who melts so often and so mindfully, I don't understand why she still has big problems. And then she also does classical stretch every day. There's like a TV show she chimes in with every single day and does that. But when you talk about continuity, even at level 1 moves, I don't understand why some of her problems just persist. I would think.
What are some of her problems?
So always like a locked up shoulder on her right. She's got some pelvic issues that she just says the word locked up a lot. So she's a massage therapy client of mine, and I've introduced her to Melt a long time ago, just to try to buy that time in between. She comes like maybe once every 7 or 8 weeks. But I'm just curious, like if it is continuity, why isn't that tissue being hydrated by now?
Great question. So I want to invite you to go back and look at Sue's pie chart of whole body stability. What else, ladies and gentlemen, could else be going on with little Miss Locked Up?
I'm sure emotional.
Ah,
Yeah.
you think? Not to mention, she's, who knows how she's doing Melt on her own. There's a lot of when left to their own devices, who knows what they're really doing. I mean, that's part of it too. But I would say there's probably an emotional component to it. Have you done an intake with her, like a thorough intake? Has she?
Well, years ago, she's been a client for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing. There's a lot when people say, oh, I'm doing it, I'm doing the work, but how mindfully are they really doing it? You say she's being mindful about it, but she also comes to you on the regular to solve her problems.
Yeah, well, and I guess because when I check with her to double check how she's doing her technique, she seems spot on, but she could be doing it in front of me spot on, but maybe lazy or not quite the same at home, maybe.
Is she doing the assessments?
Yeah.
Okay. Nancy, what did you have to say?
Yeah, it's sometimes you have to rethink the situation also, as Amanda was saying about the emotional aspect. We make pain our friend. So whatever we do, our friend always has to be there. And I had a client the other day that always has this pain in her side. And she fell, and now the pain has been exacerbated. So I'm like, oh God, what are we going to do now? She's always had that pain. I just got her into a 3D breath rebalance sequence. And I said, okay, forget about everything. Just take your mind off of that pain and just breathe. And we went into a little meditation of, the lights swirling around or whatever you want to say, that will kind of help your client to get to that place. And, let's just release it by breathing and think of it as, cleaning house or whatever. You're just getting rid of it. And we weren't paying attention so much to the pain and what caused the pain. But as Amanda said, the emotional aspect of the pain always being the pain in the side, the bane of my existence, who is that? What is it? And I told her, you don't even have to put a name to it. You don't have to think that, oh, this happened or that happened. That's why we have to get out of our heads and into our bodies, get out of that precision. We always have to do something right, and we're going to be reprimanded for not doing it right. So get out of that mindset and help her, talk her or your client through, more of maybe a meditation or just allowing them the space to let things go. Just let it go.
That's beautiful, Nancy. How was she after the session?
She never calls me. She called me the next day and said, oh my God, what we did. We hardly did anything. It was more of me trying to figure out how to calm her down and get out of the pain space. But she called me and said, whatever we did, it was just amazing. We finished with a foot treatment also. So I have it written down in my notes, but it was the 3D breath breakdown, but it wasn't thinking, now we breathe into this direction. Now we breathe in. It was like, just breathe and, let that healing light come through you. Yep. And then foot treatment, grounded, bam. She called me the next day saying, my God, this is amazing. You didn't do anything. You let it go.
Nancy. Thank you. Okay, for real, Leanne, you, and then we're going to take a break.
I just wanted to add on to Nancy's, because I agree with everything you said, but sometimes what I'll do too is I'll say, well, okay, so you feel that particular pain, but let's bring our attention to what feels good. Because often 5% of your body might feel bad, but 95% actually feels really good, right? So your eyeballs don't hurt, your left toe doesn't hurt, right? So you can kind of reframe, which I think can also just change the pattern or the loop in your brain of what's hurting and controlling your day or your life.
Yep.
So
it's intention. Yeah. And that goes into the whole idea of intention. And that is a very important concept that we're going to talk more about as we progress in the weeks to come. How you go in with intention with your language. You heard Nancy say it. She doesn't necessarily, she's not using like the Melt intro class lingo. She went in with an intention because this person was going down a rabbit hole. And so Nancy's like, all right, how do I pull them back out? Or like Leanne is saying is focus on what feels good. She switched the intention. And the intention is, how do we get this person out of this immediate pickle to get their body sense? Because if all they're doing is focusing on their pain, it's hard to stick with body sense. I don't want to sit here and sense how I feel because I feel like crap, right? All right, well, let's sense and see what feels good, right? And I love that. I think that's fabulous. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. Go have a pee break. I'm going to hit the pause. All righty, kids. I hope you all enjoyed that nice little number by Joni Mitchell, because we are indeed Stardust, aren't we? Okay, so Michelle, let's go back to your gal. All right, what color do we want? Let's use the color blue today. All right, so we have a female.
Yes.
Okay.
So the only snag with this gal is that I just spoke to her today on the phone. I don't have official form.
That's okay. We
Okay.
can still get information. She's female. Do you know how old she is?
73.
73.
Mhm.
And a dentist or a dental hygienist?
Dentist.
Okay. How long has she been doing dentistry?
All her life. Like that was, her.
All her life. Did she
Right.
have a life before dentistry, or we don't know yet? That'll be information to find out. Find out what she was doing before all her life came about.
Okay.
Female 73 dentist.
Yeah.
Okay. Where does she live?
Lillington.
Huh?
Like the town?
Yeah, like what state, what country, where she lives?
North Carolina, Lillington.
Okay, she lives in North Carolina.
Yep.
All right, I have a bunch of questions on my mind. What do you guys want to know? What are some of the questions you want to ask Michelle? She may not know the answers, but let's ask them anyway.
Is she active with exercise?
Yes, horse riding.
So nothing else. She rides horses.
That's her main hobby. Yep.
Horse riding. Does she own these horses?
I don't know.
Okay, find out if does she live on a ranch?
I don't think so because she was traveling to a barn when I spoke to her. So I don't think, yeah.
Good to know. So when you ride horses, sometimes people take care of the horses too, right? Like they feed them, they wash them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll
Good
ask.
thing to find out, like, does she care for the horses, right?
Okay.
What are some other questions?
General diet, water drinker.
We didn't get that far, but I do know she gave me a timeline of when all this started. And I know a lot about the medications. This started in May, and she's had a lot of injections
So started in May.
in May.
Okay.
Mm.
In May, which
And
is
it-
her issue.
yeah.
So what's her main complaint?
Her main complaint is carpal tunnel syndrome.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said she's had injections.
Mhm.
What kind of injections?
Cortisone.
Okay, what, does anyone want to tell Michelle the problem with having too many cortisone injections?
They eat away tissue.
Yep, sure does.
Uh-huh.
The other problem, what do we want to warn Michelle about if her client had just had a cortisone injection that week?
You might melt it right out of your body.
Yes, ma'am, you will.
Wait, come again?
You could wash it right out of the joint.
You'll flush it through. So you need to find out when she last had when she last had an injection, because what are you not going to do directly right away? the hand treatment. You're not going to do the hand treatment right away. Okay. I can speak to that from a personal thing because I'm not flipping you the bird, but I had a very swollen knuckle here when I first started melting. Nancy knows because we were in the same class. And I did everything I could. I didn't know what was going on. I went to a doctor and he just gave me a shot of cortisone. I go, well, what's causing it? He goes, it doesn't matter. You know, and I didn't know smart enough to ask questions. I took the training. And after 1 day of learning the hand treatment, my knuckles swelled right back up. Okay. So again, it's a Band-Aid on the cancer. It's not
Okay.
going to solve the problem. Okay. So what are you going to do instead?
Well,
What's the phrase that pays and melt?
Indirect before
Indirect.
direct.
Or direct.
Indirect. So you've got to do everything indirect.
okay.
What are some things she could do to protect that cortisone injection? Because she doesn't know enough. She'll be like, melt hurt me and it flushed away my cortisone and my pain came back, right? We want to avoid that. So what are some things she can do instead?
I mean, she's very upset. She's on, and the doctor put her on an anti-anxiety medication because she can't sleep, or sleeping pills. She's been given a lot of pills, like for anxiety and sleeping. And so I was thinking the rebalance sequence before bed.
Yeah, I would find out, make sure she writes down exactly what the medications are so that you can find out any side effects. That's
Okay.
very, very important.
Yeah, so she's been injected pills. She also has trigger finger.
Which, okay, trigger finger is a bummer. Yeah, okay. Okay, so she's carpal tunnel. She has trigger finger.
Does she work a lot? Like, is she a bit of a workaholic?
Yes, she's not only does she practice dentistry, but she also is a teacher, like at a university college. So she lectures, like
So she probably writes a lot too. So
she's on her computer. Oh, on her computer a lot.
yeah.
Yeah. And the pain is really, the reason why she got the shot is because she couldn't sleep at night. Lots of tingling in her extremities.
Okay. Tingling. Jeez.
Like
so
she'll ride her horse.
what?
She'll ride her horse, and then after that, she can't feel her hands.
Right, of course. So Leanne said a great word. What was the word she used to describe this woman?
Workaholic.
And what category would we put that in? Think
Fight.
about your whole body stability chart. Is that a structural problem?
No,
What is it?
Emotional.
emotional.
Okay, so we're laying all this down because Michelle needs to go in prepared, knowing that she's gonna have somebody who's got an emotional thing, because that to me, this is the red flag. And the workaholic is a big deal. She's in her freaking 70s. She should be retiring. She should be getting a little boat like Nancy and sailing and get a new boyfriend. Is she married?
She's divorced with a boyfriend. I don't know how many children she has yet.
Very important. This is all really good information. Divorced. Do you know when she got divorced?
No.
Okay. All right. Divorced with a boyfriend. Kids, who knows? Okay. And who knows? Does she have relationships with her children? Are they good, healthy relationships? Are they living? Right. So there's all sorts of emotional stuff that could be going on here. The divorce could have been horrible. So again, I go back to the emotional component, because again, she should be enjoying her life. So my question is, what is she running away from? So if her emotional issues are the true culprit, let's build the map.
Okay.
Are you following me?
Yes.
Okay. Intention, intention, intention.
Mm.
Okay, so you haven't even gotten her thing yet. You just spoke to her on the phone. Do you understand about information gathering now? Is this starting to make sense?
This was all I got from 10 minutes on the phone.
You got a shit ton of information, my friend. Think about how much more you can get, but now you know you're not going to go in there. You're not going to be a shrink. You're not going to go in there and bulldoze with a ton of questions. You're going to go in there gently and with a lot of love and a lot of compassion. And you're going to say, okay, so I would love to help you with this carpal tunnel. I'm a little concerned about the cortisone because the thing that's great about Melt is it encourages fluid flow. And if we create fluid flow in the hand, it's going to flush that cortisone right out. So let's play with some other things and see how you feel. Let's get into a rest assess. You're off to the races. Okay. So, and just like Nancy said, and just like Leanne said, notice what happens in the rest assess, because I guarantee you what's something she's probably going to just want to keep bringing to your attention.
The pain.
The pain. And what are some things, everybody, I mean, I have my opinions and my thoughts. What are some things that Michelle can say to her client to deflect away from the pain? Leanne said one.
Where does it feel good?
Yep. Yeah, where are some other things?
Oops. Can I?
Yeah.
So even though she's dealing with her body, like if she, like you can ask her how much she loves horseback riding, and like get her to maybe stop thinking about it that way, and find out about how her ride was yesterday or whatever, and did she have, were there moments that she connected with the horse, whatever, and then do the rebalance. And then she's maybe in a different plane there, a different
I love that
mindset.
Yep. Bring her back to what brings her joy.
Yeah.
Talk about what feels good. The other thing, one of the questions when you're doing her intake, you could say this, just curious, but are you planning to retire? I'll tell you, you're going to get a lot of information out of that answer, my friend.
Okay.
And that's going to be important information.
Okay.
Because as she says, no, I'm going to work till I die. Oh, how come? And if she doesn't want to answer, move on. But you might, does she have financial problems? Is she paying her adult children to live their lives? There's so many reasons. Like, does that feed into her emotional stress?
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So let's build a map, shall we? Okay, so the first thing we're going to do with her is we're going to give her a rest assess, right? Okay, everybody, we're in this together. What's some other stuff we can do with her? And by the way, Michelle might have to take this map and toss it out the window. But we're going to
on the intake
based on not just the intake, but just based on how the first 20 minutes goes.
Okay.
She may not be able to lie down on her back comfortably.
Okay.
I don't know. Okay, so she's going to do a rest assess. What else do we want to try with her?
If we've got all this medication and things, should we start with the lower body?
I don't know. Somebody tell me what should we do for Michelle? Michelle's saying lower body. What do you guys think?
I would start with a rebalance, even on the half roller, just to get her to calm down.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
that's what
Start breathing and start calming your nervous system. That's where I would go.
Okay.
Because the other thing I'd wonder is, are there other things she's doing for her own mind-body practice to deal with her anxiety and with the pain? Is she doing breathing techniques? Is she meditating? Is she seeking all those other things?
Yeah, she went online and found a couple of stretching exercises.
Okay, that's not mindfulness and stretching. Again, I'm gonna throw some serious freaking shade on that word next week. So not a fan of stretching.
Oh.
Yeah, Robin brings up a really good point. That's a question, write that down. That's a question you want to ask her. What other modalities do you do? Do you do any mindfulness exercises? Do you meditate? Do you do yoga? What else do you do? Great. I love that. Thank you. Okay, so we've done the rebalance. So let's say now we're, I don't know, 20 minutes into this session. What are we going to do next?
Are we assuming that you've reassessed after this rebalance?
Oh, yes, rest reassess, of course. RRA. Okay, so you find whatever's happened. So let's throw a hypothetical out there that she feels nothing. No changes. You got to go in with the worst case scenario. So let's see. What would you do if she felt, and I felt nothing? What else is she going to do? What else could we do to help her feel something?
Sometimes I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but I'll like to ask just very specific questions, because if it's their first time and their body sense isn't all that heightened, I'll ask like, well, when you started, were your ribs a little more lifted? Do they feel a little more connected to the mat now? And then they'll kind of think about it and go, yeah, actually. And I'll say, well, because I can see it. I don't know if you feel it, but so often I can see what's changed in them, right? If you're looking at their body while they're doing the rest assess, you can see those ribs popped and you can see their head crooked. And so sometimes I'll tell them what I see, and I'll say, this is what I'm seeing going on, but I'm not sure if you're feeling it, but just so you know, there are visual changes. And sometimes that just gives them that little bit of confidence that something's happened.
I love that. And I agree. Say, yeah, I could totally see that. Like you get really excited, like, oh my gosh, your ribs totally came down. I mean, don't be that dramatic, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because like Leanne said, poor body sense, she might have no idea. So do you feel comfortable touching people?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not a manual therapist, right?
No.
Okay, so what are the magic words you're gonna say before you touch her?
May I touch you?
Yes. Don't forget that.
Mhm.
May I touch you? Okay, great. And
And
just,
hold my hands, it's getting cold.
yep, but you don't, it's not a big touch. It could be just like Leanne saying, if your words aren't working, just reach around and say, do you feel this? Do you get a sense of this? Just little touches, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Underneath.
Use your intuition. Don't overthink it.
Mhm.
Bruce.
I would, that's great stuff, but I would more curious about her horseback riding. And it seems that that's an outlet for her.
Uh-huh.
And what does it feel like when she's horseback riding? If she's riding with a saddle and stirrups, what do her feet feel like? What does her body feel like while she's in that experience, and build something off of that?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm curious about this horse ride because I got on a horse and it was murder. I did not feel comfortable the whole time. Awful.
So, yeah, so what are some other problems you can have from horseback riding? So feet was one, maybe her feet is but I mean, especially you're sitting right on a freaking saddle. What else might be problematic?
Low back, hips.
Low back, hips.
Spine.
Yep.
Groin muscles.
You'll get more information when you see her,
Yeah.
but low back, hips, pelvic floor, knees. My God.
Did
So,
you have a question, Denise?
yep, go ahead, Denise.
Oh no, I was just gonna add something to the touch component and helping someone feel or experience something if they can't. No, so yesterday or the other day I had a workshop, and a woman, she couldn't really experience feeling the differences in the rest assess, and so not even the rest assess, just anywhere we were doing a little bit of lengthening, and so I just put my hand, I asked her first, can I assist? And she said yes. I just put one hand on her shoulder, one on her fingertip, and feeling length, and then she's like, oh, now I feel it. So it's really incredible how we can add a little bit of touch and palpating, help somebody feel again.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay.
I know one time when I had a lady that couldn't tell if any change had happened whatsoever. The one thing we did get was, I just said, do you feel a little more comfortable laying on the floor now than you did before? As in being able to just be more comfortable. She wasn't wiggling around as much or adjusting. So I felt, because I saw her adjusting less, that she just was more comfortable just laying on the floor at all.
Yep.
And she could identify with that. But it did surprise me how somebody could be so disconnected that they couldn't feel, that she couldn't feel anything I was bringing out.
Okay, I love that. Okay, so let's get back to and we're building a map. So what do we need for the map? In order to build a map, what do we need in Meltland?
The full.
All
Cool.
4 hours, right? So let's start thinking about that. What's something else? If you're like, okay, our session's almost over, you've got 5 to 10 minutes, what could you put in here?
I feel like since she's already laying on the floor, a back of thigh shear, because you're already kind of relaxed and it's an easy piece to hit, seems like it would hydrate a nice big piece.
Okay, so we're still in, we've done reconnect, rebalance, rehydrate. I love it.
Oh, release.
All right, so what do you want to do for that? You just
a
worked
big
on the lower body. What makes sense?
A side joint shear or
Treatment.
treatment.
Foot treatment.
The foot. If we're staying away from all the injection sites, yeah.
Yep, just say, we're not going to even touch the hands today. We're not going to touch the hands.
Okay.
That's the one thing I don't want to touch, even though that's your problem. We're going to see if we can get some relief doing a bunch of other things all around.
I like that.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
So what if you decide you're like, man, I don't want to do back of thigh. And I don't feel like getting her on her feet. She's all relaxed on the floor. I want to keep her chill. What else can you do?
What about the neck? Like
Yes.
the neck.
Yes.
release?
Yes, please, for the love of God, release that woman's neck. I'm
Yeah,
sitting here dying.
Because that's how
That's what I would do. I wouldn't do any of that. I would do neck release.
that's how it all started in May in her neck.
Yeah, and that's gonna be the last thing you do. Not the first,
Okay.
the last.
Okay.
And if you
Before the-
really have time, do the face treatment.
Yes, the big everything.
Yeah, man.
That's okay. So what do we got? Rest assess.
You've got a nice rest assess. And again, you got to keep an eye on the clock. If you spend a lot of time, how long is your first session?
I set it for an hour and a half because they'll
Good.
be talking.
Good. I would do your very best to keep the intake in the beginning to a half hour. Try to cut her off and get right into the rest assess. And I would even, try not to overwhelm her.
Mm.
Keep it super simple. I would almost even say, just talk 4 common imbalances. I wouldn't go through the whole stuck, stress, loves to live in 3 areas. Like, fuck that. Excuse my French. Forget it. Don't do that. Just say, okay, so I want you to notice we tend to carry when we have dysfunction and it tends to accumulate. It's going to give us, I'm just going to give you 4 things, 4 common imbalances. The shoulder blade, you're more on the shoulder blades rather than below them. You have a big arch in your back. Do you get a sense of that? Pelvis, you're on bone instead of butt cheek, back to the thighs on or off the floor. And you'll be able to see all of it. And I bet you she has every single one. Have her turn her head from left to right.
Okay.
And then get to work.
Okay.
Okay. Have her do a nice, simple, I love Leanne's idea of a nice, simple rebalance sequence on the half roller. Flat side up, you think, Leanne?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would do flat side up. And I was even thinking it might be nice just to do a little bit of shoulder blade reach as well, just to get some range of motion, and that'll help later with the neck release.
That's actually great because it's going to give you more information, Michelle, on just where she's all jammed up. And she might even be like, oh, that makes my fingers tingle or something, right? So with shoulder blade reach, and then do the rebalance and reassess her shoulder blade reach and see if she gets any improvement.
Okay.
So you're going to have an assessment within your rebalance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to get her off the roller and just say, okay, so I want you just to drink it in. So remember those 4 things. Do you sense any changes in that?
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to want to touch herself all over the place. Try to really reiterate, I really need you to not touch yourself. Use your mind's eye. I need you to go inside and sense what you feel.
Mm-hmm.
and see what happens from there. And then I would just roll her right on her side and just do the neck release with the face treatment.
So starting the base, the jaw, the temple, doing
Yeah.
all that. Yep.
I would.
Okay. Yeah. I just did it today to a lady who's a dental hygienist. She's like, oh, I was hoping we'd do this. I was like, I got you.
Yeah, and I mean, she's going to love it because she is a dentist, right? She's going to really appreciate that work. And if you can remember, I mean, you don't even have to do the face rinse necessarily, unless you want to like stand over her and have her do it. But again, a lot of information for the first session. I would just keep it as simple as you can, but it's so nice and relaxing. And again, Leanne's talking about calm her down. The face treatment is so calming. It's lovely. And then if you have time, what I would say, Nancy, what's your specialty?
Finishing sauce.
The finishing sauce. That's right, baby.
Hey.
The finishing sauce. Especially if she had a terrible time doing tuck and tilt, which she probably will. So get her back onto the roller, have her do a little more gentle rocking, noticing if it's a little bit easier for her to do. See if she can tuck or tilt just for fun. Tuck and tilt your pelvis again. Let's see if that's a little bit better. And then just have her breathe. Do some focus press a few more times. Maybe try the shoulder blade reach one more time. And then one final assessment. Totally no baby gates. There are no baby gates. Do you see how you're customizing this? Like completely, like you would never do this in a class, or actually I would, but you know what I'm saying?
So go back to the start.
Hell yeah.
I like that.
And if you feel like you still even have time where she could do shoulder blade reach and you can have her just do a little neck turn reach. One time on each side, get in and get out. I would keep it very brief because again, we got to be careful with all that shots she's had, but just get a little tug on that tissue. See what happens.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
With that cortisone shot, so
Honey, your connection's a little funky. I can't really.
I would think that anything we do melt, we know about that.
What's that?
Oh, hold on. Okay, is that better?
It's like you're drunk. It's
Can
like,
you oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't connected to Wi-Fi. So with the cortisone shot, I would think that anything we do, even indirectly, would start to move fluids out. But I mean, what do we know about that? Should we advise? Does it matter if we're working indirectly? Like, what do we know?
I'm not following your question. I'm sorry.
In terms of moving the cortisone shot out of the joint area.
Yeah.
That point that you made earlier.
Yeah.
So if we did a little bit of upper body length, just you want to spend like 10 seconds there.
Yeah,
so
get in and get out.
Okay.
Yeah, don't want to spend too much time. Again, but I think doing the hand treatment, that's way more direct to really flush the tissue, like literally.
Okay.
I mean, I learned the finger rinse and the cortisone, like I could have almost seen it. I'm telling you, the next day was like,
wow. Okay.
It was crazy.
I have a question on the cortisone. So I'll establish when she had it. What's the time period that you can be confident you don't have to worry about it being flushed out?
I mean, Sue usually says like a week to 10 days. Isn't that what she says, Nancy? Like a week to 10 days.
Okay.
I would also make it your mission to find out how many shots she's had and how often she gets them.
Okay.
And tell her flat out that too much cortisone will actually cause more damage to your joints and you're going to make your problem worse.
Okay.
And you might even want to do some research on that before you go in so you can speak with authority. Don't just take my word for it because we said it. Like you need to do your research. Remember, research. Make sure you know what you're, speak with authority, but also be impeccable with your word. Remember your 4 agreements. Okay.
I also think that while you're doing all of this, that it's nice to notice how uncomfortable she might be in her body, if she doesn't quite feel, is her not sensing her body? Does it look like she's fighting it? Sometimes you can see that in their faces or how their body is positioned. Just to note in your head, not necessarily to address it at all.
Something else, if my instincts are correct and emotional is her real issue, like that's her ground zero, what might happen in this session? Just tagging on to what Robin's saying.
Crying.
Crying.
Yeah, she might have an emotional release.
Okay.
So what are some things Michelle can do to make sure she properly holds the space? What are some things she can do and say? What?
Well, I can definitely have tissues ready.
Okay,
And
tissues, that's great. What else?
encourage like that it's okay. Like this is a good thing. It's a positive response.
Yeah, it's a release, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's in a safe space to do that.
Thank you. Safe space. That's very important. She's got to know that you are a safe place to land and that she wants you to come back. And if she cries again, it's going to be okay.
Okay.
What's something else? If you're in the middle of doing this and she starts crying, what's something else that you can say? And I think Julie knows as a massage therapist, what is it that we say to our clients?
Well, I know what I say. Do you want me to wait or keep going? How do you want me to go forward?
Yep. Do you need a moment?
Okay.
You need to collect yourself. Do you want to stop for today? And then just be present. Yep. Be present. It may not happen. I mean, it sounds like she's as wound up as a cat's hiney. I don't know. But I mean, to me, I just see it's like, especially the workaholic bit and the fact that she is divorced. And, does she have a nice relationship with her boyfriend or is he mean, I don't know.
They don't live together. They don't live together.
Okay. Nancy?
I just want to mention something. I had a very high profiled dentist in New York City that I was working on. And he was like, he had to work because he's Jewish and he wanted to make sure that his family was always provided for. And he was like 70 when I left the city. So, I mean, it was like, he has to do this. It's his mission. It's his responsibility. And sometimes when I would get him on the roller, he would just fall asleep. I mean, just like that. He'd fall asleep. So just be prepared.
Yep. I mean, she might fall asleep during the rest assess. Yeah. The other thing I'd be
On the roller, yeah.
Are you going to be at her house?
She's going to come to my house. So her boyfriend actually lives in my town, Holly Springs. She lives in Lillington. So she's going to come to my house.
Okay. Let's assume if she's hunching over bodies all day long, how do you think she's going to look lying on the floor? What are some things Michelle should have at the ready?
Pillows.
Yeah, have some bolsters. Have some bolsters. I'd bring more than one roller with you. I'd bring the whole trio. I'd bring the half roller, full roller, and travel roller. I'd bring a blanket. I'd bring a pillow, or have it in the room like it lives there.
Yeah. I have a room set up actually, like that's all set up. I'm a yoga teacher too, so I have all that stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah. And I've got the journey box I'm going to play.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, that's probably, you know what, you might want to do, just play it by ear.
Okay.
Some of this stuff you're going to have to play by ear, but we're putting a hypothetical out there and I think this is a great start. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your gal. But let's assume it all goes swimmingly. She feels amazing after this and she wants homework. What's the homework we can give Michelle to give our gal? We're assuming an awful lot, people, but let's keep going with this fantasy. And once we have some concrete stuff, we'll see what happens. So what's some homework we can give her?
I was hoping the foot treatment.
let's all talk at once. Okay, who?
I was thinking the rebalance sequence before bed for sure.
Okay. Okay, what else?
If she's as out of her body as it sounds like she is, she might just just like to do a little standing assessment and just friction melt her feet. Do one foot, stand on it, notice it probably feels different, do the other foot, ask her to take a few, try and work on a 3-dimensional breathing, just easy breathing, trying not to get too tight or anything, and just leave it at that. Because a lot of times people can't even remember what you did.
Yeah. So to help her remember, what can Michelle do?
Make a video.
Yep, videotape the session or make a video. Yep.
Yeah. I quite like to make a video after and not record the session.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, I was recorded once and I didn't really like the playback. It was kind of ugly.
Yeah, you can say, if you like, I can show you how to do a little standing assessment friction with your feet. Would you like to record it with your phone? So you have that?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Invite, you don't make it happen. You ask the question, right?
Okay.
I love that. I think those are two really great homework bits, but outside of Melt, what else is some other homework? We're making a lot of assumptions here, but like what's some stuff that might help support her? Yep. Make sure she's drinking water. She's probably not.
Yep.
And I know I sound like a drug pusher when I say this, but ask her about medical marijuana if that's something she's open to.
Okay.
Because that's great for pain relief. It's a genius for sleep and inflammation. And also, if she's bad with water, it'll make her thirsty. I'd also find out, again, we talked about diet, right? So if she's not eating very well, that's going to be a great way to help her stimulate her appetite. I don't know. I'm making a lot. I have no idea about this woman. You'll learn a lot more. So I'm giving you all these ideas so that then you can fill in the holes. But the medical marijuana, just say, have you considered that? And if she's like, oh, God, no, say, okay, fair enough. And then let it go. But if she's like, no, I never thought about that, say, I would ask your physician. And if they're opposed, I would find a naturopath who could talk to you more about it so that you could be more educated, because it's, I've spoken to a few people who've used it with their clients to great success, or whatever, something like that. Again, my old mom, game changer. I'm actually hitting the dispensary after class today, just so you know. So I have to get my mom more weed and my husband some weed and me some weed. I'm just going to print just all the weed.
I did those gummies, like when I was really before I found Melt, I did those gummies. They were pretty cool.
Yeah, so two things she can try with that. And if she says, oh, I've done CBD, it doesn't work. So I'm not saying CBD, I'm saying actual THC. Yeah, the actual THC. And on the Facebook group, I want you to go look in the documents. I have a paper on there on the endocannabinoid system that you can read through so that you can speak with authority. If that's something you feel comfortable talking about, if you don't worry about it. You can even say, I'm still learning about it too. It's something that I keep hearing is really great. So yeah, so you could say medical marijuana is an idea to consider. Have her speak with a physician, have her look more into it, because she could do what I recommend are those sublingual tinctures and before bed, not during the day.
Oh, no.
Something to help her sleep, right? And a topical, and have her get a topical. And I mean a THC topical.
Yeah, I think she's open to that because she spoke about arnica. She was doing arnica creams, which she enjoyed. So she definitely doesn't want surgery because the doctor said, I can't help you anymore. You have to have surgery.
Then she needs I would look and see if you can find maybe a different doctor for her. I would, again, work on your referral list and see if you can find various physicians, osteopaths, maybe a functional medicine person in your area, if there's someone that you can refer her to check out. But if she's not comfortable with actually ingesting THC, tell her to look into a topical. But the key thing, same with melt, consistency, consistency, consistency. She's got to use it regularly in order to get it into her system for it to start working. You can't just use it once. There's no magic pill. And you might have to tell her that.
Yeah.
One thing you might want to just double check, I'm not sure about your state, but like my state, my husband does a CDL license, so he cannot have any THC in his system.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure their line of work, if they get drug tested by surprise, that will show up. So they need to be aware if they're allowed to have that in their system, and she could lose her license over that if it's not allowed in your state.
That's fabulous advice. Thank you for that reminder. That's actually very, very important. Same thing with license to touch.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are 2 minutes past time. So does anyone have any other thoughts or questions before I pause the recording? Peace.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I would just add, maybe have her write in a journal. I love that journal idea. Oh, look, barking. I love the journal idea. I've started handing out journals to my newer clients, and it helps them keep track and start connecting with themselves and taking ownership of it.
I love that.
So yeah.
Now, do you use the well list, like the well-being list? Like, how do you feel on a scale of 1 to 12, emotionally, physically, blah, blah, blah? Do you do that too? Okay, great.
Yes.
Awesome. So just have all that ready to go, Michelle. And it may be that you never give any of that to her. Again, it sounds like she's pretty open-minded and she's at a point of desperation, but try not to overwhelm. So you want to keep it simple, but keeping in mind that you're for a while, you're going to keep trying to get more information from her. And if she's open to being a case study, ask her permission and say, can I bring your case to my coworkers or to my group? And
yeah, I think she's pretty open, being in the medical field. I think she is. She's just like, hey, and she's in education as well,
Yeah.
So she's open-minded, and I mean, I just from the call, I felt like we really hit it off.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
I think you're going to do really well with her, but it'll be interesting. I can't wait. It's like a soap opera. I can't wait to hear what's going to happen next week.
I know. I'm excited.
And give us an update. Next week, if one of you has a case study to bring in, we're going to start focusing on upper body issues. So if none of you come back with anything, we're going to continue on like the sands through the hourglass. We're going to keep talking about Michelle's gal. But, I want to give you all an opportunity to bring your case studies in so we can talk about it, because your case study might help Michelle, Michelle's might help yours. We all are here to help each other, right? But Michelle, you've got the Facebook group. When are you meeting with her?
I've just sent her the intake form, and then she's going to get back. It'll be next week. I'm hoping before Thursday, but she has a travel thing, so hopefully she'll be back in time. I have to firm that up though. So
okay, well, anything you want to update us on, any changes put on the Facebook group, I'd love to see how she fares.
Yeah, I'm hoping to she said she'd get the form back to me tomorrow, so I'll put on the Facebook group any more information that I've gleaned from the form.
Great. Remember, keep it anonymous.
Oh, yes.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording and we'll see you next week. Yay.